Hey everyone, this is OCD Live. I'm Ali Grayman. We're going to be answering some questions about OCD. If you have any questions, you can always leave them below any of the videos and I can answer in the next show. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please subscribe and let's get to some questions. So the first question I have is, one thing I struggle with a lot when trying not to react to the thoughts or feelings is the sense of denial OCD throws at me. How do you move on past this in recovery? So to answer the question, again, let's go over how OCD develops. Is that the person starts to get really worried about a certain situation, right? The person repeats the situation in their mind over and over again. They might do avoidance, they might do reassurance, they're doing self-reassurance, trying to figure things out, all of this stuff. When they do this, they're coming from a position of fear. And that position of fear shows the mind, that part of the mind that controls OCD, the amygdala, it shows the mind that this situation is dangerous. Because why would you react to something to this extent, right? That's how the mind is programmed to think. It's not programmed to understand that this is OCD and this is what happens when you have OCD. It's only programmed for real stuff, okay? So that part of mind says, okay, you're paying attention. That means the situation is dangerous. Let me send you more thoughts. It sends you more of the same thoughts, then whether like exactly the same theme or slightly different, it just sends you what it kind of comes up with, right? So it sends you more thoughts, you react again, the situation grows. Now all of a sudden, when you say, okay, you know what, this is OCD, I'm done with it, I'm not reacting anymore. So just like what you're saying in your question, right? Choosing not to react, which is great. Okay? So as soon as you start choosing not to react, your mind says, oh, no, 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 this is very dangerous. You're in denial. You got to go back to reacting. Because again, in the mind's eye, the situation is real. The amygdala is convinced that the situation is real because of the reactions in the past. So there's nothing really you can do in terms of it throwing those thoughts at you. It can also come the sense of denial, the sense of guilt, the sense of shame, the sense of I'm not doing the right thing. What if it one day turns out to be true? All of these things, right? So this is all part of your mind trying to get you back to reacting, which is absolutely the thing you should not do. Because again, the mind doesn't understand OCD, so it feels that the situation is real because it's been conditioned by you and by anybody who has OCD. When I had OCD, same thing, right? To view the situation as real. The only way you can untrain it is to do the exact opposite that you were doing before. So before you were paying attention, the mind learned that the situation was important. Now you're not paying attention. Eventually, the mind will learn that the situation is not important. But it will take a little bit of time, but it's just going through those motions. So the next question I have is, it's actually two questions. It's about my own personal recovery. The person's asking, how many setbacks did you have? And now that you're in recovery, does it mean that all of your symptoms are still there and you're not bothered by them? Or are you symptom free? Again, thank you for all your help. So, okay, first of all, okay, I had many, 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 many setbacks, as most people do when they're recovering. For me, it was difficult because I came into the situation with absolutely no knowledge of OCD, and I feel like just through so many conversation with clients, it's very, very important to have that level of education when it comes to OCD recovery. You need to educate yourself on how exactly OCD works. So just like we discussed in the previous question, right? Seeing those patterns, I'm telling you guys, patterns in OCD are everything. It always doesn't matter what the thought is, it always operates on the same patterns. Like I talk to clients every single day, and it's every single day it's the same thing, but just different thoughts, right? But the patterns are exactly the same for everybody. And actually, to that extent, I am doing something that's going to be pretty cool. We're going to do polls on the youhaveocd.com website, which will just answering general question. And I guess you guys have to help me with this, because if you guys don't answer the questions, we won't have the results, right? So answering questions about OCD that you're experiencing, such as how long does each thought last? When does it leave? When does it come? Does the stress affect it? All of these things. So you can see that they are exactly the same for everybody who has OCD. The severity is different because like level 10 feels exactly the same for everybody who has level 10 OCD, right? Versus level 5 OCDs feels the same way for everybody who has level 5, right? So the intensity is different, but the way OCD works and those patterns are exactly the same. So going back to the question, when I came into the situation where all of a sudden, and like if you have OCD, right, you know that all of a sudden OCD just hits you. It's not like a slow, gradual process. Like you get kind of thoughts here and there when you're younger, but it's when it hits you in a big way, it's really suddenly, within days. So coming from zero education about it, I don't even think I've ever heard the term OCD. So because back in the day, it wasn't as common as it is now, like in the media and everything. So coming from that position, I knew nothing. So I did a lot of reassurance, and it took me a long time to understand that reassurance in all of its ways, right? The avoidance, the thinking back to the situations, the asking, the checking, all of that was just dragging me back. And I didn't know that for years. Do you know what I mean? So I think that my recovery would have been a lot better had I been recovering kind of like my clients are recovering, right? That they know what they're doing, they're going through the process, they're recovering. Mine was not like that because, I just didn't know anything about it. So it was a trial and error thing. So I failed a lot. And then just slowly learning that, okay, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. I've done it a million times, still doesn't work. So let's try something else, right? Like if your reassurance is not working over and over again, you're like, okay, well, I'll try something else. So that's kind of how my recovery went. It was very, very bumpy ride, I'll tell you that. So the next part of the question is, and now that you're in recovery, does that mean all your symptoms are still there and you're not bothered by them, or are you symptom free? I wouldn't say I'm in recovery at this point because it's been so long ago. I'm fully recovered. I don't have any symptoms. Um, it's not an issue. And this is what happens when you recover from OCD. It just, your regular life takes over. You don't really think about any of the thoughts that you thought about when you had OCD. Now, at the same time, it doesn't mean that you are always floating on cloud nine and everything is great and, all of this stuff. It's not like a euphoria state where you're happy all the time, but you never hit that level 10 out of 10 OCD. Do you know what I mean? You don't even hit it like you don't even hit like 5 out of 10 OCD. So you're having regular stress, regular situations in life, but you will never be as frazzled and as on edge as when you had OCD. So in that way, it does in the beginning kind of feel like almost like a euphoric state, but then you get used to it and you're like, ah, just regular life. So it's um it really, I think that the first year after you recover, that's the only time you can still consider yourself being in recovery. And the reason being is because there's still quite a high chance of you slipping back because you just recovered. After that, I mean, if the thought comes in and you've done all of this work in terms of recovery, you already know how to do everything, So for you to refuse or to pay attention to the thought and pay attention to it so much that it becomes an OCD situation, right? You get some random thought and you start paying attention to it all over again and keep paying attention to it for say a few months. I don't think that that would really happen, like just to really anybody because they've done all of this work going up to this point. So for me, yeah, no, definitely I'm fully recovered. And then, in terms of asking how it works, just the first year you really have to watch yourself. After that, not so much. So the next question I have is, what is your view on therapy with OCD? I found it made the anxiety spikes more intense and prolonged. I found the idea of explaining OCD to my therapist incredibly difficult from the fear of being misunderstood and that I would have come across um, and self-diagnosing. So let's start from the end of the question and work our way back. So, with self diagnosing, I know it's really frowned upon in terms of like how people talk about self diagnosing, but what you're doing really is in depth researching your situation, your thoughts and coming to a conclusion that this looks and feels like OCD. So you spent much longer time on trying to figure out that this is OCD than your therapist who is seeing you for the first few minutes. Now, if your therapist has actually had clients who had OCD before, then they are in a good position to actually diagnose you at all. If you are, say, one of their first clients who has had OCD, they have way less experience than you know, in terms of OCD, what it feels like, how much knowledge they have. Because if they don't need to know about it, I mean, they know from school, but, you know, how much do you remember from when you went to school, right? It's not like they kind of keep it in their mind like a computer, right? So just kind of keep in mind that they're a real person just like you, and you self-diagnosing is not much different than what they're doing. But it is good to have an opinion of somebody else, especially if they're coming from a different background of being educated on it. But just don't put yourself down in saying that self-diagnosis is much, much worse, you know? I've never seen a person who diagnosed themselves with OCD and it turned out not to be OCD. You know, it doesn't happen. So if you think you have OCD, then you do have OCD. I mean, the chances that you don't are, I don't know, 1 in a billion. You know, same chance of you being struck by lightning, right? So even, I would say even lower than that, because, you know, it's not random, right? In terms of, you know, being struck by lightning is random. This is not random, you know. So you understand the patterns. Again, going back to understanding the patterns, you are understanding the symptoms, and they're the same for everybody. So yeah, you do have OCD, right? If if you feel like when you're talking to your therapist and they don't know this, then you need to look for a different therapist, or just, you know, do the recovery on your own, because you really don't need anybody else in terms of recovery. You know, you can do this on your own. Another trap with the therapists is, I find a lot of the time the person spends the entire session trying to explain to the therapist the nature of their thoughts, the exact kind of thoughts that they have, for reassurance. Like, let me tell you every detail of the situation to make sure that this is an OCD thought. So what the person is doing the entire session is seeking reassurance. And as you know, so you know, the entire session the person is making themselves worse, you know, with the help of their therapist. That doesn't make sense. So if you feel like the therapist, instead of helping you recover and looking at it as OCD and trying to understand it as OCD, they're saying, well, you know, how did it, where does this thought come from? Does it come from your childhood? Well, were your parents nice to you? All of these things, they're irrelevant for recovery. You know, I can tell you right now, it doesn't take rocket science. It's, if you have, for example, like, why do you have one thought versus another thought? If you are worried about, say, religious OCD, it's because you are most likely a very religious person. Religion is very important to you, right? Or maybe you're in a situation where religion is important to somebody else in your life, such as your parents, and you're reacting off of that, right? Um, if you have harm OCD, that means you're a very sensitive, very sweet, nice person, and the worst thing for you would be to harm somebody. So you will have harm OCD thoughts, because your mind is trying to protect you from the worst possible thought you could possibly have, you know? So whatever that is for you as an individual, that's what you're going to get. And that's the end of the story. You know, you don't need to spend sessions and sessions and sessions trying to figure it out of where exactly it came from. You know, and if you feel like you're doing that, again, find a new therapist. You're the customer in this situation, and you really are the customer considering how much these sessions cost, right? So you're the customer. You don't need to go see this person if they're not helping you. Their goal is, their job really is to help you. So if they're not doing that, find somebody else who's doing that, or you just go at it on your own. You know, because they're helping you. You are the one who's doing the work and recovering. So learn as much as you can about OCD. Just don't research OCD, you know, obsessively. because that's not good either, because then you can get into situations of this person said this person said that, and what if I don't have OCD, and have an obsession on that topic. So try not to do it obsessively. If you feel like you are doing it obsessively, pull back for a few days, but research OCD as much as you possibly can, and then with the help of your therapist or without, do the recovery work. And when I say do the recovery work, I don't mean once a week in session. I mean every moment of every day when you get a thought, which for most people it is every moment of every day, then you are doing the right thing. See, when I'm talking to my clients, what we do is, because I'm always available on Skype, so they have a question, they'll text me on Skype, and then I'll answer it as we're going. Because I really clearly understand that it is every moment of every day that the person I'm helping is dealing with it. So the worst thing for me is to see them go and do reassurance. So I always tell my clients, I'm like, I don't care, just message me. And then we will talk about it. Not talk about it as in me giving them reassurance, but talk about it is, okay, what do I need to do? How do I get back to recovery? How do I stop these thoughts from bothering me? Okay. And trying to always keep you should always keep yourself, I try to keep the client always in the state of recovery, in the state of viewing the thought as OCD. So this is the kind of therapy, if you can call it therapy. I'm not a doctor, obviously you can't call it therapy, but the kind of help that actually works. Discussing something once a week and then doing reassurance all week long after that will not get you further in the recovery. So just being very focused and going through it. I'm sorry again, I went on and on about the therapist. It's just because every time I talk to clients and they tell me these stories of their therapists, it's like one is worse than the next, I swear to you. So it's just I just I wish people wouldn't pretend to know something when they don't, because that's what I see a lot of. The therapists take on clients, saying, yeah, I'll help you recover, and they really can't. They just physically can't do it because they don't have enough background, enough knowledge, enough experience with OCD to actually help anybody. Also, again, if the person doesn't understand OCD, like your therapist doesn't understand OCD, you have to be careful of what you tell them, because if they're not understanding the thoughts, how can they really help you? And if you say to them, well, I think I killed somebody, they can reply to you and say, well, did you kill somebody? And what a stupid reply to give, right? But you're telling somebody who's not prepared something that is way beyond what they can comprehend. So yeah, I would say in terms of saying details about your OCD, just make sure if you are describing details, first of all, that you're not doing it for reassurance, because that doesn't benefit anybody. You shouldn't even be doing that, right? But if you are doing it just to clear something up or whatever, again, not in the reassurance way, make sure that the therapist can actually help you with it, and that they understand and they won't take it the wrong way. Um, I've never heard any really like horrible stories of a therapist taking it the wrong way. So if you're worried about like something bad happening, they're reporting you or something like that, that doesn't really happen. But the lack of understanding does happen. So next question I have, hi, can you explain what recovery is like? I'm feeling better every day, but obviously have doubts and what if in the back of my mind. It's getting easier to drive, but ERP is hard, but I'm trying. You know what? I mean, this is what it is, that every day you're going to feel slightly better. It's going to, just like you're saying, it's going to get a little bit easier, and then eventually just goes away altogether. Now you're going to have setbacks, and this has to do with stress in other parts of your life, has to do with seeking reassurance. um, if you seek reassurance the day before, the next day you're going to feel worse. So really understanding, okay, today, how am I feeling today? Am I feeling better or worse than yesterday? And why? Right? Did I have stress yesterday? Was I doing a lot of reassurance yesterday? Or was I doing a lot of exposures and the brain is rebelling against me? Because that happens as well, that the person did everything correctly and then they're getting hit with a lot of thoughts. It's because, going back to, I think, the first question I had in today's show, that, you know, as soon as you start to say no to OCD after saying yes for a long, long time, your brain says, no, no, you have to get back to reacting. So it's going to throw a lot of thoughts at you with much higher severity, and you have to refuse that reaction from that point. So like from a much more severe kind of level of OCD, right? So, and that might kind of catch you off guard and start an OCD obsession, like a different OCD obsession, or the same or whatever, but higher intensity one. So that's just the process of daily recovery. But what you should be seeing is week to week, not day to day because that varies, but week to week, you should be seeing progress that the thoughts maybe are coming in as much as they were, but the anxiety is lower. So say you're getting 10 thoughts a day, but the anxiety to each one of those 10 thoughts is not 10 out of 10 anymore. It's say like 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10. Or maybe you have just a one thought that's rotating in your mind all day long, but before you had an anxiety level of 10 with that thought, and now it's an anxiety level of 8 or 7, right? So that shows you recovery process. If you are feeling like you're not getting anywhere, that means you're still doing a lot of reassurance. And usually when people are not sure what they're doing wrong, it's usually self-reassurance. So going over the situation in your mind, situation or situations, over and over again, trying to figure it out. And maybe like doing research, maybe asking somebody, but mostly going over it in their mind. So you have to make sure that as soon as you realize you're doing that again, stop doing it. Just no, I'm not doing it. I'm in recovery mode. I'm not doing this any longer. And again, just like I was saying in the previous question, like this is where having a good therapist who you can, like me, not that I'm a therapist, but I'm just saying, like having somebody who you can contact and say, listen, I'm getting into the thoughts again. Can you help me? Because this will not work with a once a week sessions unless you are much further ahead in recovery. And like for my thing, like that's why I have the 3 packages, because sometimes you need daily support, and then sometimes you're already like at five out of 10 OCD. You don't need daily support. You're fine once a week. And what I see with my clients is I see us starting with a very kind of severe OCD for them, and they're contacting me all day long. Then, as they get better, we go to once a week, then, once every 2 weeks, something like that. Then they're like, oh yeah, I forgot about my session, all this kind of stuff. Because it's I always think that that's awesome, because it shows that they don't care about it anymore. Do you know what I mean? That they've moved past it. They're not concerned about missing a session. They're not concerned about their OCD. They're fine, and that's great. That's the process of the recovery. But if you're not seeing progress week to week, you have to examine where you're going wrong, because I guarantee you're doing self-reassurance, like thinking about the situations. Pretty much, because that's what I see just time and time and time again. So stopping yourself from analyzing. So next question I have is, hi Ali, when you were recovering, did you seek information about OCD from other sources such as books and so on? Yeah, the more information you get, the better. Again, as long as it's not obsessively. I have read a few books, and some were helpful in understanding my brain or in helping me realize that I was not alone in my thinking. And some exercises were helpful, but I find your methods more practical and something I can do on my own. I also did not like reading endless stories of other people's problems with OCD, as it stirred up fear in me. Also, I have also understood some to say that OCD is not fully treatable and will always be something that I have to deal with, perhaps like recovering alcoholic. But you give me hope that it is treatable. Thank you for all you do. I feel I'm getting better every day. That's really sweet. Um, it is fully treatable, and you are doing the right things. And all I can say to this is just keep going. Just keep going. Um, it's if you feel like you don't need help, additional help, if you feel like you can do it, see, at level 10, I think everybody who has OCD needs additional help, because it's just really, really hard. At level 7, 6, 5, you can do this on your own. It's going to be a little bit more difficult without support, but you can do this on your own. And it's just going through it and just doing it, every moment of every day, just going through it. And yeah, the more information you have, the better, as long as you don't start to get into the debate of obsessively thinking, well, what if I'm doing the wrong thing? What if this is not OCD? What if I'm not recovering? Because again, these are what ifs, and that can start an obsession all on its own. So the next question that I have is, hi Ali, as you have mentioned, seeking reassurance is what makes OCD bad. Now, reason for which we seek reassurance is an attempt which comes very naturally to calm down the anxiety. These moments of anxiety are the moments when you feel overwhelmed, panicked, and helpless. At such difficult moment when all you can think of is some kind of hope to reduce the anxiety, the brain starts looking for reassurance. Now, if the work is to avoid doing any compulsion or reassurance, please advise how is one supposed to deal with the anxiety? How should we train our brain not to go through the habitual path of compulsion and deal with anxiety in that anxious moment? So, basic answer is you have to sit with anxiety and do absolutely nothing. Do not chase the relief from anxiety. You will not get it. Even if you get it momentarily, it will just get replaced with a new thought. So, yes, you will have anxiety. No, there's nothing you can do about it. Yes, it will be extremely uncomfortable. Yes, you will feel like you need to do reassurance and you need to get rid of the anxiety. You just have to do absolutely nothing. There's no way to get around this. This is the most difficult part of OCD, is feeling like basically you are in a life or death situation and doing nothing about it. And that's why I say refocusing is really good. So giving your mind something else to fill that vacuum. So say, okay, you know what? I'm not going to react to this thought. Instead, I'm going to do this, 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 and this. It's not going to take away the anxiety entirely, but it's going to make it a little bit easier for you to manage that high level of anxiety. So it's going to go down a little bit when you're, focusing your attention on something else. But in terms of getting rid of the anxiety completely, when you have, a situation like an OCD situation, it's not going to happen like that, like instantly. The only way it can happen is through reassurance, and that's the last thing you should be doing, because that will just get you further into it and get your anxiety even higher the next time. So kind of resolving to the fact that yes, I will have anxiety. No, there's nothing I can do about it right now. But if I refuse to do anything, next time it's going to get better. So you're kind of losing in today's situation, mentally. Not really, you're winning, but you're losing in terms of how you're feeling in the moment, right? So you're losing right now to win big later. Do you know what I mean? And there's just absolutely no way to get around it. The only way, really, if you would like to go down this road, is if you take medication as you're going through the recovery, just because it's gonna kind of cushion your fall a little bit. But again, it's a band-aid. So just taking medication is going to maybe reduce your OCD by, I don't know, 10, 15%. For most people. For some people, it gets rid of it, but not like entirely, but it gets rid of it to a higher degree. But most people just see a slight reduction in their symptoms. But again, it's a band-aid. You stop taking medication, you're right back where you started if you're not doing the work. So there's really nothing you can do. Just go through the process. You're already doing the right thing, so just keep on doing it. Don't chase the relief from the anxiety. It will come naturally as you recover. So this is the end of today's show. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. You can visit youhaveocd.com, and there's a private recovery program there with me. There's ebooks. There's a lot of free information on how to recover from OCD, so please check that out, and I will see you in the next show.